I have heard of escaping from prison, but these criminals booked it right from the court. From trying to escape from glass boxes to running away right in front of the guards, these courtroom escapes are just insane. Join me on this wild ride exploring some of the most bizarre courtroom escape attempts ever. Will these criminals evade justice? Let's find out. Brian Jee Nichols' killing spree in court. This is what happens when you let one of the worst criminals escape in court. On the 7th of November 2008, Brian Jee Nichols was sentenced to life imprisonment. This sordid tale might imply that Brian was a serial killer, but in reality, he was a jealous boyfriend, consumed with rage. He broke up with his girlfriend after 8 long years of being in a serious relationship, and she began dating a minister from their local church named Chris Rowell. Nichols forcefully entered her home, restrained her body with duct tape, and assaulted her. The police arrested him on multiple charges. Brian's first trial was termed a mistrial with a hung jury, and when he was informed of a retrial, he made a rather odd statement. Speaking to the press outside court, Brian said, "I'm not going to go lying down." Was that a veiled threat? Brian's family and friends kept warning the district attorney's office of his plans to escape. One of his friends approached the prosecutors to inform them of Brian's plan to escape and his request for a credit card in the suit jacket he was supposed to wear at the trial. That's not all. Brian's mother went as far as to send an email to the Fulton County Sheriff's Office, warning them that her son may attempt to steal an officer's weapon at the trial. Given the intensity of Brian's will to escape, the retrial began in a tense environment. Just 2 days before his killing spree, the deputies responsible for escorting Brian to the court and back to his cell identified something odd on his shoes. Upon inspection, they discovered 2 piercing shanks, a typical prison-invented weapon crafted with the metal found on door hinges. Experts believe that Nichols had complete knowledge of how poorly his case was proceeding, and he even mocked the assistant district attorneys during the retrial, remarking how they were doing a much better job this time. The assistant district attorneys Gail Abramson and Ash Joshi approached Judge Barnes, who decided to increase security during Brian's testimony in the case. On the 11th March 2005, Brian arrived at the courthouse with Cynthia Hall, the sheriff's deputy. Speaking to the press about the horrific incident, Deputy Dilsey Thomas recalled that on the morning of the killing spree, she implored Deputy Hall thrice to add another deputy to Brian's escort team. But Hall was confident that would prove to be a fatal mistake. It appeared that Deputy Cynthia Hall trusted Brian and did not even require him to wear the mandatory leg shackles. That's despite the fact that the police had identified the sharp shanks in his shoes just a day before. Once Hall removed Brian's handcuffs from one hand, he attacked the deputy and shoved her into an open cell. He overpowered the officer, punching so violently that she collapsed instantly. Brian then took Hall's gun belt, which also carried the magazines and radio, and grabbed the keys on his way up. Now, changed into his street attire, Brian exited the court's holding cell area and used Hall's keys to retrieve her Beretta 40 cal semi-automatic pistol from a lockbox. Strolling across the Sky Bridge, Brian made his way to the private chambers of the presiding judge, Roland W. Barnes. There, he forced all the case managers and attorney David Allman to sit on the floor at gunpoint, inquiring about the whereabouts of the judge. Just then, Sergeant Grantley White, the court bailiff, came in and attempted to seize Brian's gun. SGT White was carrying a gun, but Brian quickly disarmed him and forced him to handcuff his other captives in the room. Somehow, Sergeant White managed to push the emergency button, alerting the court security. Brian exited the chambers and made his way to courtroom ATF from a connecting door just behind Judge Barnes' bench. Judge Barnes was presiding over a civil trial, and Brian shot him there, and then a close-range shot fired in the back of his head. Bryan scanned the courtroom for the assistant district attorneys working his case, but when he couldn't spot them, he shot the court report, Julie Brandau. Meanwhile, Sergeant White was able to communicate with the court security via radio, alerting them of Bryan's killing spree. By this time, Bryan was on his way to a side room where witnesses were kept before the trial, looking for his former girlfriend. Thankfully, she hadn't arrived by then, and her life was spared. After that, Bryan escaped court through an emergency staircase, killing 2 court security personnel on his way. He managed to seize a tow truck and drove off on Peachtree Street. What I find especially fascinating about this case is that it could all have been prevented. Leonid Grier's court escape through the ceiling. Leonid Grier, a Russian murderer who claimed Satan commanded him to kill his sister, made a rather hilarious attempt to escape from a Moscow courtroom. The 18-year-old killer attempted to climb his way out through a hole in the ceiling of the courtroom dock. The video footage shows Grier crawling out of the glass cage where he was kept and clambering his way into the hole in the roof space above it. This incident took place in the Shabinsky District Court in Moscow, and it made international news in no time. Grier's crawling attempts were thwarted by 3 armed policemen who grabbed his legs and roughed him up with their batons. They tried pulling him back to the ground, but Grier's incessant efforts and bold attempts forced them to bring out their tasers. The tasers worked wonders at seizing Grier's momentum, pulling him down from the ceiling with his trousers pulled all the way down. Then, he obediently climbed back into the courtroom dock. The court decided to detain Grier for an additional 2 months following his brazen escape attempt. Around this time, he voluntarily confessed to having murdered Ariada Corral, his 21-year-old sister. While his escape attempt was kind of funny, the details of his crime are downright gruesome. Leonid Grier and Ariada Corral shared an apartment together. One day, the police discovered Aria lying in the hallway of the apartment block with multiple stab wounds. Grier was praying stark naked when the police barged in and arrested him from his flat. He made waves in Russian and international media with fanatical claims of being commanded by Lucifer or Satan to murder his sister. Eyewitnesses of the horrific tragedy revealed that Grier undressed after killing his sister and used his sister's blood to draw out demonic symbols, first on her head and then his own. The witnesses also revealed that he then asked them to free him of Satan. Initially, during the police investigation, Grier made no mention of Satan and claimed that he killed his sister because it was necessary and that I did what I had to do. Grier told the interrogator that even though he had perfect ties with his sister, he did not regret killing her and was completely aware of his actions. A rotten criminal to the core. Tanner Jacobson and Cody Howard, chased by Judge R.W. Buzzard. This is by far my favorite escape attempt from this roundup because it introduced me to the brave and gutsy Judge R.W. Buzzard. Small-time criminals Cody Howard and Tanner Jacobson spotted a window of escape while preparing for trial in a Washington state courtroom. They figured all they had to do was startle a few security guards and outrun them. What they didn't expect at all was that the judge would rise, toss away his black robes, and lunge forward into action, giving them one hell of a chase. Judge R.W. Buzzard didn't lose a second as he stood up, removed his attire, and dashed out from behind the bench to bring these 2 petty criminals to justice. He didn't just chase after the criminals in the courtroom or outside in the hallway. He practically sprinted down an entire staircase while pursuing the convicts and even tackled one down to the ground. When speaking to the media later, 28-year-old Cody Howard and 22-year-old Tanner Jacobson admitted how idiotic and downright silly their spontaneous escape attempt turned out to be. Clearly, they had no idea the judge presiding on their case had the energy of a pro wrestler, a convicted meth user and the world's most careless guard. What is it with Washington state that makes every other criminal feel confident making a run for their freedom? In one case reported from the Benton County Justice Center, one convict, high on self-confidence, managed to escape the courthouse still in his handcuffs. Gerald Hyde II, a meth user and criminal charged with illegal possession of illicit substances, was being brought back from the courtroom. With a few swift movements, he managed to free himself and race back to the courtroom. From there, Gerald ran out toward the hallway while wearing his handcuffs, vibrant orange jail shoes, and a jail-issued shirt. Thinking smartly, Hyde quickly removed his shirt before stepping out toward the public exit and used it to cover his attention-grabbing handcuffs. With this genius move, he managed to avoid suspicion as he slipped into the crowd, moving towards the public exit leading out into the streets. You have to give it to the man. He used his brain during the whole escape attempt. This escape certainly deserves a big round of applause. But what if I told you there was one more person who helped Gerald make his escape? Credit for this escape attempt goes not to Gerald, but to the guard responsible for escorting him back to his jail cell. That's right. While Gerald was audacious in his rather pointless escape attempt, the irresponsible guard who let him out of his sight was the real hero of his story. Sadly, the police managed to track him a mere 3 miles away from the court, hiding at the Pepper Tree Village apartments. In less than 2 hours of his escape, he found himself back in his jail cell, much deeper in legal trouble than he was before his brazen attempts. Still, what a mad lad. Ted Bundy's escape from the courthouse library. If you have not been living under a rock, you probably know of Ted Bundy. But did you know he made multiple escape attempts during his confinement? Even one from a courthouse library. Ted's undeniable charm, good looks, personable demeanor, and oozing charisma made him strikingly different from other serial killers. He was so likable that even presiding judges couldn't help but hand out favors to him. Ted knew exactly how to exploit his good looks and charms to get what he wanted. After all, he used his personality traits and handsome features to sexually assault, rape, and murder more than 30 women in multiple American states. Some reports suggest that Bundy had murdered more than 100 women. On top of that, Bundy was a remarkably talented escape artist, and it was his uncanny talent of escaping that helped him evade the law and draw a smokescreen over him every time police investigators seemed to catch up with his antics. The police officially stopped Bundy during the early hours of the 16th of August, 1975, after observing suspicious activity near a relatively calm residential neighborhood. Upon examining the car, the officer identified weird items: pantyhose with eye holes cut into the fabric, a crowbar, a ski mask, and handcuffs. Initially, the police thought Bundy planned to use the items for a robbery, but it didn't take long for the investigators to tie Bundy and his vehicle to the attempted kidnapping of Carol DeRonch. And that's how Bundy found himself in police custody, standing in a long line of criminals as Carol DeRonch is called and asked to identify her assailant from the list. Carol picked him out instantly. The prosecution was confident that they had substantial evidence to charge Bundy, and he was found guilty of assaulting and attempting to kidnap Carol, resulting in 15 years of imprisonment in the Utah State Prison. But that was only one case where Bundy had committed dozens. It didn't take long for the Colorado investigators to link Bundy with the brutally tragic death of 23-year-old Karen Campbell. Then, Bundy was shifted to the Garfield County Jail in Colorado, where he awaited his trial. When his trial began, Bundy decided to act as his own counsel and represent himself in court. The presiding judge allowed this request and Bundy was exempted from wearing the typical leg shackles and handcuffs mandated for every convict. But that's not the extent of the privileges granted to him. He was even allowed the privilege of visiting the courthouse library, containing prized and rare legal volumes, to conduct research for building his legal defense. It was because of these privileges that Bundy managed to successfully escape. On the 7th of June of 1977, Bundy was relaxing after a short break from the court's preliminary hearing. He made his way to the library, where he spotted a window wide open and beckoning him to lunge forward and leap. Later, describing his escape attempt during a telephonic session with the prison psychologist Dr. Al Carlisle, Bundy revealed the details. He said that the guard entrusted with his care strolled outside the library to enjoy the smoke. Just then, he felt a strong breeze of fresh air on his face and turned back to find the windows wide open. He said the sky was beautifully blue, and I told myself, I'm ready to go. With that, he walked toward the window and jumped right out. The jump from the second-floor window was around 30 feet, and Bundy collapsed hard on the ground, spraining his ankle and garnering quite a few scrapes and bruises. He had escaped, but he had no money or resources, nothing except for the clothes on his back. He limped the entire way to Aspen Mountain and started hiking his way up into the woods. It took the police officials at least 10 minutes to realize that Bundy had escaped from the library, and they immediately began placing roadblocks throughout town. All police officials and citizens were placed on high alert. Notify as soon as you spot Ted Bundy. Bundy was too clever to saunter around in public. By this time, had limped his way to the top of a mountain, where he broke into an old hunting cabin, stealing a great many supplies, including a rifle. For the next few days, Bundy spent his time exploring the forest and losing his mind. All the wilderness and no women to murder made him disoriented and quite sick. Finally, he decided to give up bonding with nature and hike down the mountain. He ventured into Aspen with a plan to steal a car and ride out of Colorado. By this time, Bundy's ankle was seriously injured, and the lack of rest made the pain excruciating. 6 days after his courtroom escape, Bundy was back in his jail. Murder suspect in Oregon Courthouse makes a run for it. There are some laws that just don't make any sense. Apparently, the removal of all shackles is a mandatory legal requirement for a criminal's presence in court, but it's not such a wise decision if the criminal in question is hatching an escape plan and eager to skip court proceedings. The criminal in this escape attempt is Eddie Villalobos Jr., who was attending a court hearing in Hillsborough, Portland on 27th of February for the purpose of jury selection. Eddie Villalobos was preparing to go to trial after facing accusations of murdering one man and stabbing 2 men 2 years ago. The entire escape attempt was captured by the security camera footage, and it is wild how easy it all was for him. You can spot the 28-year-old murderer making his way inside the courtroom, guarded by 2 police officers on both sides. The accused can be seen wearing dark pants and a blue dress shirt. As soon as his handcuffs and leg shackles are removed, Eddie Villalobos scurries to get behind 2 desk chairs, and just then, he dashed out of the open courtroom door. You know what's downright hilarious about this escape attempt? Not a single police official or court official attempted to block his path to the open door. I guess they were too shocked to see him even trying to make it out. Then, the footage shows Eddie sprinting up and down a series of court hallways in an attempt to find the exit. He made his way through 2 doors as 2 officers attempted to chase him. Eddie made his way through the crowded hallways, pushing the passers-by aside, and finally dashed out of the court exit. He was caught in a few hours, hiding in a closet in an empty apartment nearby. Tennessee convict jumps out of a second-floor window of the courthouse. Freedom can be enticing. But is it enticing enough to make you jump out of a second-floor window? Apparently, yes, because a Tennessee convict, 33-year-old Michael Smith, stood up from his bench and simply dashed out of the window. The bold escape attempt was captured by surveillance cameras inside the courtroom and outside the court building. Michael was attending a court hearing alongside 6 other convicts. Before jumping from the window, he got up from his bench multiple times, sometimes to get a tissue from a table placed next to the window, and sometimes with another excuse. In reality, he was sizing up the window and assessing how much damage the fall could possibly do. Once he had made his estimates, he walked over to the tissue box one last time, threw open the window, and jumped out. He landed unceremoniously on his back after hitting 3 air conditioning units in a row. I guess his calculations were a bit off. Unfortunately for him, a sergeant who was standing nearby quickly stopped and captured him. He was rushed to the medical center to treat his bruises. And with that, our roundup comes to an end. Don't forget to tell me which one of these brave and bold courthouse escapes you found the most exciting. Be sure to like, subscribe, and comment, and keep sharing what kind of stories you'd like for me to cover next in the comments down below. See you soon with yet another fascinating topic.